Now, for this novella, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, what I decided to do was really focus on word level analysis according to the main characters. Now, what I want to go over is the key quotations that you should consider and the word level analysis that you should focus on when considering the character of Dr. Jekyll. Now, the first thing to remember is how Robert Louis Stevenson describes him initially and how he appears to society. He is described as a large, well-made, smooth-faced man. Now, the word level analysis to focus on in this description is the adjectives large, well-made, smooth-faced, which we also call pre-modifiers. Always remember we call adjectives pre-modifiers if they come before the noun, and they're called post-modifiers if the adjectives come after the noun, okay? But also you can simply refer to them as adjectives. Now, this is important because when you're doing the word level analysis here and you're talking about Dr. Jekyll's character, essentially this ties to the idea of duality, this notion that he outwardly presents to society this image of being highly civilized. He's 50 years old. He is somebody who's highly educated, very well respected. And essentially these adjectives really create a sense of respect within us as readers. Hence why when we do realize that him and Mr. Hyde are the same person, it's all the more shocking. Now, of course, Mr. Utterson, and this happens in chapter 3, questions Dr. Jekyll during his party about his connection with Mr. Hyde, and he questions the wisdom behind leaving all his possessions and his will to Mr. Hyde. Now, Dr. Jekyll goes from looking really happy, very jovial, to having, and in other words, there comes a blackness about his eyes. And the key quotation here, of course, is blackness. So there came a blackness about his eyes when he's talking to Mr. Utterson. In other words, he now has this shadow that falls upon him. His smooth, well-made man, this smooth-faced, well-made man appears to have this kind of dark hidden side, which he represses. Now, the word level analysis to focus on in this quotation is blackness, this blackness and also eyes. Blackness, this is dark imagery, it's quite sinister imagery. We're starting to get very quick glimpses of this other side of Dr. Jekyll. And of course, you need to focus on eyes because always remember that eyes are symbolic of the soul. Our eyes are usually seen as a window to our souls and our innermost beings, okay? Again, this is touching on duality, this other hidden side to Dr. Jekyll, which we don't pick up on until much later on. Now, the other key quotation is after Mr. Hyde kills Sir Danvers Carew, and suddenly there's a drastic shift in Dr. Jekyll. He becomes sick, he withdraws from society, and Mr. Utterson, of course, goes to visit him to tell him, have you heard the news? And he finds a very sick-looking Dr. Jekyll. And we learn this in this quotation. So Dr. Jekyll, comma, looking deathly sick. And the word level analysis you want to focus on is deathly, which is an adjective, again, also a pre-modifier. This wording is very sinister, very powerful. It shows that Mr. Hyde and Dr. Jekyll's relationship is far closer than we had initially thought. He is vastly changed by this killing of Sir Danvers Carew by Mr. Hyde, okay? Then he declares, he promises he'll have nothing to do with Mr. Hyde. He says, I am quite done with him, okay? Now, in terms of this, the first thing to remember is that this is a declarative sentence. Always remember that declarative sentence is basically when anybody states a fact, feeling, or mood. So he's stating, this is Dr. Jekyll, he's saying, I am quite done with him. This is a declarative sentence. But also, word level analysis that you want to do from this quotation is the contrast between the personal first person pronoun I versus him. Right, so this is third person pronoun. This contrast creates the impression that Dr. Jekyll believes he's very different to Mr. Hyde. He's standing separately to Mr. Hyde, who is him. But of course, he cannot separate the two as the novella progresses. The other key quotation to remember is when, of course, he then completely withdraws from society. Again, this is still a mystery. Mr. Utterson and Enfield are out and about walking. They then see Dr. Jekyll looking outside of his window, okay, so he's totally withdrawn from society and he looks like some disconsolate prisoner. Now, word level analysis here is the simile, like, and of course he's being compared to a prisoner. We wonder what is enchaining him to his house. Why is he not free to leave and go for a walk with Mr. Utterson and Mr. Enfield, who invite him, okay? And of course, an appearance comes over him. We don't quite know until later on we learn that obviously he's transforming turning into Mr. Hyde, okay? The other key quotation to remember with Dr. Jekyll is now from his confession, his letters, okay? When he realizes and he shows his epiphany, his realization that in all of us, man is not truly one, but truly two. Now, word level analysis, you want to focus on alliteration of T, so truly, truly, and two, but of course the repetition of truly, which emphasizes Dr. Jekyll's epiphany, his realization that man has a dual nature, which of course goes against Victorian ideas that man can only be rational, only be civilized. Actually, we do have a very dark and animalistic side. Of course, this is very reminiscent of Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, which came out at the time, which essentially said that actually we as men are not inherently rational, very civilized as we think. We're just a very evolved type of animal. We're an evolved form of an ape. The final quotation to bear in mind from his confession is when he states, "My devil had long been caged, he came out roaring." And this is a metaphor. Devil is the dark side of Dr. Jekyll, which he tries to push down, he tries to repress, however it comes out, okay? And of course, this is embodied in the character of Mr. Hyde. So that's it when it comes to word level analysis and key quotations to remember for the character of Dr. Jekyll.